Okay, check 1, 2.
A little piece of something won't come off on that. Come on.
All right. Straighten myself out here. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Welcome. Thank you for tuning in. Excited to share this practice with you today. So just to recap, last practice, we worked on lengthening the pectoral muscles through the strength of the rhomboid muscles. Okay, so we use the rhomboids, which are the muscles between the shoulder blades, to retract our scapula, and retracting the scapula pulls the attachment points of the pectorals, which are by the shoulders and to the chest, and pulls them away from one another, lengthening. Okay, so we used opposing muscle groups in order to stretch a different muscle group. So real quick to review, a muscle can do two things. A muscle can contract or cannot contract. Those are the only two things it can do. It cannot stretch. So stretch isn't an action. Stretch can be done by an outside force or an opposing muscle group. So in this case, the rhomboids will pull the shoulder blades toward each other. So the strength of the muscles in the backside are what are stretching the front side. The pectoral muscles in this case can be either engaged or not engaged. So whether a muscle is engaged or not doesn't mean it is not stretching or it is stretching. A muscle can lengthen while engaged or while disengaged. A muscle can also shorten while engaged and while disengaged. How does a muscle shorten while disengaged? An outside force. So if I take my left arm, if I want to shorten my right pectoral muscles with my left arm, I can pull the right arm across. Now, I haven't used my right pectoral muscles. I've used my left rhomboids to shorten my right pectoral muscles. I could also lay on the ground, in which case the ground would be shortening the pectoral muscles. So a muscle can shorten and lengthen while engaged or disengaged. Key distinction, because I know that before I came to yoga or in the beginning days, and I think a lot of people feel this way, that you can actually stretch a muscle. So the muscle cannot stretch itself. An opposing force like the ground or like gravity can stretch a muscle, and an opposing muscle group or muscle can stretch the opposing muscle. So last time, just to recap, we did strengthening the rhomboids to stretch the pectoral muscles. And again, the pulse is the title of this experience that we're doing together. And the idea here is to understand how can we both develop strength and range of motion. I use that word more often than flexibility. Flexibility is the word I will use when I'm marketing something, because everybody wants to be flexible. But the reality is what we truly want is a healthy body. And most of the time we associate that with being flexible. At least a lot of yoga people do. You see somebody who can put their leg over their head, and maybe you think, man, they're limitless. They have so much freedom in their body, whatever it might be. And they may be, or they might be experiencing deep pain in their hip or their low back or whatever it might be. So we can't necessarily say because somebody is strong or because somebody is flexible, they're not experiencing pain or they're experiencing freedom or joy. It's almost completely separate than that. There might be moments of freedom within having a flexible body. There might be moments of freedom within having a strong body, or there might be moments of health and whatever. There could also be lots of moments without. So I want to make sure that what I asked you last time was to really become clear on your intention, why you're deciding to step into a training that was so clearly marketed as flexibility. Not to say that you shouldn't be moving towards flexibility, but to become very clear as to the why behind that. And then from there, you can make better decisions. So, in the early days, I certainly had this, I would say, drive towards flexibility at a certain point in my practice, because I saw my friends like in the room, they were able to do things and I want to be able to do things. I saw videos, I saw photos, of my teachers and whatnot. And I was like, okay, when I get there, then I'm going to be an advanced yogi or whatever it might be, or then I'm going to be good at yoga. There's just some sort of superficial drive of thinking that if I got there, something good was going to come from it. My early days, my teachers were really, I think, good at educating me and fellow students on the importance of strength in the body and range of motion. And then when I got to like Manhattan and I got attracted by all the different, outside stimulus of yoga, then I wanted to become more flexible. And so injuries started happening pretty rapidly because I was going towards flexibility at all costs. So I remember I was one time in this class, I was in an Ashtanga class actually, or not a class, a Mysore room. And that basically means everybody's practicing at their own pace. And I really wanted to get this pose that it's called, what is the name of the pose? Whatever it is. Where you bind the arms around the leg. You could see it's a pretty challenging pose for me. And I'm not actually able to get the pose, at least not while warmed up. But it was a very hard pose then, still a hard pose now. And so I had somebody help me with it, and they grabbed my arm and pulled, and the shoulder dislocated for a moment and back in, and tore my rotator cuff muscles. And that was the drive towards, well, if I can, if you just pull me into this, if you just make me flexible, then I'll get the pose, and then something magnificent is going to happen. On a conversational level, that's not the case, but there's something deep inside of us that's subdued, and it's usually not at the forefront. So if you're talking to somebody, you say, well, of course I'm not, I'm not looking to injure myself. Of course I'm not. But there's something inside of us that pushes ourselves past what we know is appropriate, because we think that something good is going to happen, either egoically, emotionally, mentally, physically. And that's not to say you won't get injured practicing really sound, healthy yoga. It's not to say you won't get injured doing normal routine things like walking and running. So we as living physical human beings are always at potential risk for injury, no matter what we do, whether we do yoga or we don't do yoga, whether we do, whether we walk every day or we run or whatever, that no matter what we do, if we're living in this physical body, we're at risk. But we don't want to necessarily, amplify that risk by doing certain things that perhaps are not necessary, or at least being more aware when things get dangerous so that we can minimize the risk. Okay, so now I want to just kind of move into today's discussion, and we're going to be working on the outer hip muscles. This pose right here that I'm just sitting in, which is a half lotus posture. This posture for me, when I came to the yoga practice, was, I would say, just impossible. Let me just put it that way, where I could never, first of all, get my knees to come parallel with my hip joints, and to be even in a cross-legged position like this while sitting up straight is quite a feat. So when I came to the yoga practice, if I even tried this, I would be something like this, holding on the ropes to keep myself up. My hips were incredibly tight, especially the outer hips. So today what we're going to be doing is focusing on how to create supple, that is, muscles of the outer hips that are both strong and flexible. So we'll be using strength in order to awaken these muscles, to know where they are, And then we'll do some stretching of these muscles in order to give them the appropriate ability to lengthen. So we want our muscles to be able to both activate and disactivate. And we want to be able to activate them through range of motion, which is also a challenging thing. The reason why I chose this muscle group today, and we'll be going back and forth. We'll do shoulders again. At another point, we'll do, core and whatnot. But for today, the outer hips, I was speaking to my father who came up and visited me yesterday. And he told me that when he was dancing one night with his wife, his outer hip had like a little bit of a pop and tremendous pain. And we were just talking about the general area of this outer hip that he was pointing to. And, the worst case scenario, this was about a year ago, then it seemed to heal and feel better. So it sounds to me like perhaps, and I'm not a doctor, of course. I told him you should go see somebody, but it sounds to me like that maybe he didn't have a full tear of the musculature, but maybe a partial tear. And, the tendon was pulling away from the bone. So what I was trying to tell him is that that I know his body and my body are very similar. We have the physical makeup is similar. So I know my outer hips, they tense up, they tighten the fastest in my body. And so I know it's probably the same for him, just from, passing down those genes. And I'm grateful that I have this yoga practice to keep my outer hips stretched, lengthened, and also strong. And it's one thing that the yoga practice has really provided me with, for sure, is the hip relief that I had so much tension. But my father doesn't practice yoga. And so I know if I didn't practice yoga, and he's in his late 60s, I think at this point, if I didn't practice yoga and I was in my late 60s and I had all of the buildup of tension in my hips that without, having stretched them, then yeah, I would probably have to have a, muscle repair or whatever too, because what I would like to let you know is that you've got attachment points, which is basically a muscle attached to two different bones, sometimes three, but a muscle will attach from, like in this case, the outer hips attaches to the outer pelvis, the ilium, and then down to what's called the greater trochanter, which is your outer hip bone, the outer thigh bone, I guess you would say. And these two muscles, the gluteus medius and minimus, attach to this point. Okay, and they form like a triangle on your outer hip. Now, all muscles, hopefully, the belly, what's called the center of the muscle, is elastic. It's stretchable, it's expandable, and it's contractible. That would be a healthy muscle, one that can lengthen and have a recoil effect and come back. That's healthy. But a lot of the times, what happens for people is either muscles get locked short, meaning they can't be elastic, which is why flexibility is so attractive to people, or muscles get locked long. They're overly long. They're not able to contract back in. So this is locked long and locked short. These are common for a lot of people, not in all the muscle groups, but we all have one or two muscle groups that do that. And my suggestion for my father was, well, I think his outer hips are locked short based on my body, right? So I suggested at the belly of the muscle to start massaging first, because I know if he stretches the outer hip muscle, that what's going to happen is the tendons are going to pull away from the bone, because it sounded like to me that the belly of the muscle is so tight that when the belly of a muscle is really tight, then the tendinous attachments to the bones, they pull away from the bones. You get tendonitis, or you get muscle tears. And then people have to, hopefully the worst case scenario is we have to get them repaired, surgically. Best case scenario is we have micro tears and we can heal that back. So we're going to start today, and I'm going to ask you to feel these muscles with your thumbs. And let's see, I can show you on this side. If you have your pelvic bone here, the pelvic ridge called the ilium, and then if you sway your hip out to the side, you can feel what's called the greater trochanter. There's a bone that will poke out. Okay. Now the medius and minimus, gluteus medius and minimus, form a triangular shape. Okay, across to the kind of around here and then around here. Okay, and these muscles, what they do, first, while you're just sit down and try to palpate. That means push in with your thumbs. If you lean over to the side that you're palpating, it'll soften it up and you can kind of massage that area a little bit. Okay, you can use 2 thumbs. And then you can go to the other side and lean towards the area that you're massaging, because the muscle will shorten and soften and allow you to kind of get in there. This was one of the things I was trying to tell my father, is like, you can get in there yourself and start massaging and move the muscle down towards that attachment, the greater trochanter. That's where a lot of where he was experiencing the pain. Okay. Now, those are the abductors, 2 of the abductors. Now, there are 2 other ones we'll talk about today. The TFL, it runs down the front. It also diagonally goes into what's called the IT band, which is this, runs along the seam of your pants, basically, down to the tibia down here. So I means ilia, tibial band. And then the other muscle is your glute maximus, your butt muscle, okay, your big buttock muscle back here runs and attaches to the IT band. So you have this big triangular energy, one coming from the front of the hip and moving down into the IT band, the other one coming from the back of the pelvis down into the IT band, and then you have these 2 abductors, the gluteus medius and minimus, forming a smaller triangle. So you have this triangulation coming from your pelvis and surrounding like this, coming down into the outer knee here. So this is, and what do they do? You know what? Stand up so you can just do it with me. The lean into, I'm going to mirror you for now. Lean into your right hip and let it sag out to the side. Okay, and this is actually stretching these muscles, even though it may not feel like a stretch to you. Now, you can take your left foot off the ground. You're going to move this hip across until your pelvis hikes up on a diagonal like so. And that's going to engage or shorten these muscles of the outer hips, the abductors. And then you can slowly, try this, slowly let the hip sag out to the side. It's going to lengthen the abductors. It's harder to balance. And then squeeze in to your left, and you'll feel these muscles engage. Okay, sag out to the side, disengaging. They're probably still engaged, actually, because you're balancing on one foot. They're just lengthening. And then squeeze in, and you should feel them shorten and engage. Okay, then release. Let's try the other side. These are, again, the abductors, the outer hip muscles. Sag out to the side first and find your greater trochanter, the outer hip bone. Okay, then lift up your right foot and then squeeze the greater trochanter in so it goes more towards the big toe. And in order to keep your balance, your body has to kind of lean off to the side, or you have to side bend your spine, one or the other. Otherwise, you would fall that way, right? So here you go. Sag it out to the side slowly, and then squeeze in. And your pelvis goes on a diagonal now rather than up and down. Slowly sag it out to the side, and then bring it in. Okay, this is the hard way to feel your abductors. Okay, the easier way is to feel this action, which is to lift this leg. I showed you the standing hip abductors activating, because that's largely what the abductors do in real life, is they stop your hips from sagging side to side and being all sexy when you walk. Okay, rather than your hips going like this, which your spine would be really cranky if you walked like this. They keep your hips more centered, keep you from falling out to the sides. Okay, but in yoga, we often use the abductors to actually widen our legs apart. So what I'd like you to do is you're going to do a combination of 2 things. One, you're going to take your left hip, sag it out for a second, then squeeze it in, then abduct, that means lift your right leg out to the side until you feel your outer hips engage. Okay, then bring it back down. So now we're going to be engaging both sides of the outer hips, the abductors. Sag your right hip out, squeeze your right hip in, hike your left hip up, then abduct your left leg out to the side until you have both abductor muscles engaged. Then release it back down. Okay, we'll do that again. Sag left hip, squeeze in, hike up, abduct, then bring back down. Now, one thing that you're probably doing when you abduct, sag, squeeze, is you're probably externally rotating like this. Keep the leg internally rotated for now, so it's pure abduction and not external rotation. More on that later on. Okay, so let's try 2 more rounds, one round each side. Sag. This is so you know what the opposite is. This would be stretching the abductors. Then squeeze in, strengthening the standing abductors. Then abduct the upper leg. Okay. See how high you can get it up. Okay. Then release. If you're getting cramps in your outer hips, that just means that these muscles are a little bit weak, or maybe, also we'll try later when you're more warmed up, they might be more ready for it. Sag out to the side, squeeze in, hike up, and lift up. And release. All right. Warm up the wrist for a moment before we come onto our hands. So the abductors, the outer hips, we've got 4 muscles that we're working with today. The 2 major muscles, gluteus medius and minimus. Then the other muscles, TFL, tensor fascia lata. A lot of people make jokes about the tensor fascia latte that you can get at Starbucks. And then the gluteus maximus, which is your buttock muscle. Okay, so you've got these 4 major abductors that we're talking about today, and we're going to strengthen them first. And then we're going to see if we can stretch them if we have enough time. But at least we're going to strengthen them, that's for sure. And one thing you should know is that by strengthening your abductors through range of motion, you're lengthening your adductors. So by developing strength of your outer hips, you're going to develop flexibility of the inner thighs. You see how that activating my abductors on both sides stretches the adductor muscles. All right. Now come to all fours, hands and knees. Grip your fingers into the ground. And let's find our abductors. First, take your feet mat width apart. Knees are hip width apart. And press your knees out isometrically away from each other. And that'll get your outer hip muscles to activate. So like you're trying to separate the yoga mat underneath your knees. Okay, you feel your abductor muscles now activating. One of the major things that yoga allows us to do is to feel, to sense our physical form. This is one of the major things that asana practice helps us with, is to feel our body. So what I'd like you to do is not just engage a muscle and then forget about it, but engage it and feel the sensation of it. That's what's going to develop the intelligence of your body. That's where your body is going to open up in a big way, is when you can feel the sensations that you create with your actions. Okay, now relax. And that should be relieving after doing that. We're going to transfer that into down dog. And it's hard because your knees lift up off the ground and you'll probably stop the abductions. But see if you can press your knees out to start. And anterior tilt, that means lift your tailbone. Start to move back. And when you lift your knees up, don't let them wing out to the sides. So don't like flare out to the sides. Keep them straight, bend the knees, but straight down to the ground. And push the back of your hamstrings away from each other as you stretch your shoulders long. So shoulders more towards the ears. Now pressing the back of your hamstrings away from one another to keep the abductors, the outer hips, active. Okay, you'll feel your hamstrings stretch a lot too, because when you activate the abductors, what tends to happen is more anterior tilt of the pelvis begins to happen. Okay, now come forward to plank pose. Grip the ground on the inhale. Exhale, knees down, child's pose. Inhale to all fours, hands and knees. Arch and look up. Press the backs of your hamstrings apart. And downward dog. Let's do another one like that. Inhale, forward to plank pose. Inhale. Knees down, child's pose as you exhale. Inhale, all fours, hands and knees. Arch. And downward dog, exhale. Press the backs of your hamstrings out. One more round. Inhale, forward. Exhale, knees down, child's pose. Inhale, forward. Tuck toes, arch. Exhale, Adho Mukha Svanasana.
Right leg to the sky on the inhale. Pause, hold here. Now, if you want to open your hip, which many of us do, right? We get into three-legged dog and we would open our hip, and we're going to do. I'd like you just to simply acknowledge, you can look at me for a second. It's the outer standing abductors, the outer standing hip here, that's going to open the pelvis. Okay, so what opens the pelvis is the outer hips of the standing leg. Then you can bend your knee. So simply acknowledge that it's your outer left hip right now that is opening the pelvis. Now, some of you might have minimal range of motion there, and that's partially because your adductors, your inner thighs, are tight, or your outer hips are not strong enough yet. Okay, straighten the right leg on the inhale, turn the hip pelvis down, and on the exhale, step your right foot forward. Come up on your fingertips and enjoy a breath in. So the major practice of asana is to, in my opinion, to become more aware of our physical experience. To me, that's the purpose of asana. When you study the practices of yoga, and asana being a very small portion of it, if we're going to align with the rest of the yoga practices, then it must be about awareness of this physical form. Let's take a full breath in and out. We'll do three breaths and using our exhales to twist. So inhale. As you exhale, turn the belly, turn your chest, twist. Inhale to release. Again, exhale, turn the belly, turn the chest, twist. One more, inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Step to down dog, exhale. Inhale, forward to plank. Exhale, knees down, child's pose. Inhale, forward, all fours arch. Exhale, down dog. Left leg to the sky on the inhale. Pause. Now, like we did when we were standing, if you squeeze your right hip in, that will open the left pelvis to the sky. Okay? The pelvis is moving because the attachment points of the right side of the outer hip are moving toward one another to open the pelvis up. Let's take a full breath in. Bend the knee if you like. One more. Straighten the leg on the inhale. Step forward. Come up onto the fingertips. We just take a few breaths here. Tuning into the sensation of your body. That includes the energy that pulses through it, the breath, prana, life force. Now prepare yourself. Get strong in the legs. Take a breath into your upper back. 3 times. Exhale to twist. Belly, chest, arm. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Inhale. Downward dog. Forward to plank on the inhale. Exhale, child's pose. All fours, inhale. Arch the back. Exhale, down dog. Right leg to the sky on the inhale. Step between your hands as you exhale. Turn the back heel down, come up onto your thigh with your forearm. Side angle preparation. Left hand to the hip. Now, if you bend your back knee a little and lift the back heel up, you can internally rotate the back thigh bone a little bit, and you can externally rotate it. It's a little bit awkward. I just want you to know that the thigh bone itself can rotate in the hip socket. Then place the foot down. And then I'd like you to know that the pelvis can rotate up, down towards the ground and open towards the sky. Now, those are two different things. One's happening from the muscles of the left hip, and the other is really happening when the pelvis turns down from the muscles of your front hip. So try that a few times. You might have to bend your knee a little bit. I don't want you torquing the knee at all. So if you feel any sort of strain here, then back off of it. But turn your pelvis down towards the ground a little bit. Okay, then turn it up towards the sky a little bit. You'll feel a stretch in the adductors when you turn it to the sky. You'll feel a release of the adductors when you turn the pelvis down. Okay, then again, turn the pelvis towards the sky. The adductors will stretch, the inner thighs, and then turn it down. Now, if you do this consistently and slowly, you're going to start to feel that your front outer hip muscles begin to awaken and engage. Okay, those outer hips are called your abductors, one of which is the gluteus maximus, probably the one that's kind of going to get tired in this position here because of the rotation of the front leg and the fact that it's all the way out to the side. Okay, you do a couple more, seeing if you can really find more movement or more range of motion without any sort of pain in any of the other joints. So please be mindful. I have my hand on my sacrum, by the way, to kind of help me feel the movement of my pelvis. All right, that should give you a bit of tiresomeness in your outer front hip. Step back to down dog. All right, forward into plank pose, inhale. Child's pose as you exhale. All fours, hands and knees, arch, look up. Exhale, Adho Mukha Svanasana. Second side, left leg up to the sky. Step between the hands as you exhale. Turn the back heel down. Place your left forearm to the thigh, right hand onto the hip, and pause. Okay, so what I was doing is I had my hand back here on my sacrum, which is a triangular bone in the back. It's hard to draw without seeing it. The back between the two sides of your ilium, and two sides of your pelvis. Okay, and again, I'd like for a moment, bend the back knee and see if you can pivot the back thigh bone in and out so you can recognize that this is movement happening at the right hip joint. Okay, so the muscles of the back leg are creating this movement. Then place your foot down. But moving the pelvis is actually created by the front hip, the front side, the left outer hip muscles here, okay? And you can go very slow, making sure not to tweak anything along the back leg. So making sure, for me, I'm kind of letting my right knee be a little bit soft so that I don't twist it at all. My ankle is moving with me too. It's rotating. So don't worry about like correct alignment in the back ankle. Just worry about letting the pelvis rotate to the degree that you can towards the ground and away from the ground via the glute maximus and the medius and the minimus here. It's going to be a lot of glute maximus. I think in this position, you're going to feel it more with the gluteus maximus, but I also really do feel the abductors as well. Medius and minimus. We just keep going, slow movements. And again, when you close the pelvis towards the ground, you feel less of a stretch in your inner thighs. When you open the pelvis, you feel more of a stretch in your inner thighs. Inner thighs are the adductors, the opposing muscles of the abductors. I usually say AB just to emphasize B as in boy, versus adductors is ADD as in dad. Okay, so add to the midline, AB to move away, abduct. So you just know what my terminology here. Okay, that should really give you a nice heat in the outer hips here. Release, hands to the ground and step to down dog. Forward to plank pose, inhale. Knees down, child's pose, exhale. Forward to all fours, hands and knees. Tuck toes, exhale, down dog. Come forward to all fours again, inhale. And do everyone's favorite abductor strengthener. That is sarcasm. That is like fire hydrant, dog at the fire hydrant. So first I'm going to show you, and I'm going to have you do the left hip first. Okay, so left hip, sag it out to the side like we did when we were standing. Okay, that's a disengagement or at least a lengthening of your left abductors. Now squeeze it in, and as you squeeze it in, cross a little to the midline so your pelvis lines up more the inside of your left knee. Then lift your right leg up and out to the side. Now, if you sagged your left hip out to the left, that would be a lengthening of the left abductors. I'd like you to shorten them by squeezing the left hip to the right. Okay? Then use your core muscles and back muscles to stay lifted in the left side. You can take your hand out to the side. So your left knee presses down and out. That gets your pelvis to move in and open upward. Okay, then release both hand and knee to the ground. This is a very challenging posture. It's not, doesn't give you a lot of glory. Not something you're gonna really, well, maybe you'll post it on Instagram. I'd actually would love to see this posted in the Facebook group so I can help you with your abductor strength of probably the standing hip. Most people, when they do this, the knee doesn't go very far and a lot of their weight is sagged into the outer hip and they can't move. And a lot of times they think it's because of the tension of their adductors, but it's really the weakness of the abductors. So let's try to get stronger here. And I encourage you to post yours in the Facebook group. Sag your right hip out to the right for a moment. That's so you can feel the lengthening of the abductors so that we know what the opposite action is. Now, squeeze your right hip in until it forces your pelvis to open, okay? Then lift your left leg up to follow that. So your pelvis squeezes into the midline across the body, then your left leg follows that. Now your outer hips on both sides are active. One thing that a lot of people do is they externally rotate too much in this leg. Keep it neutral. So lift their foot up the same height as the knee. Now get light lifted, turn the torso like a twist, your torso to the right, your hips to the left, and you're gonna feel that cross body abdominal engagement as a little bonus there. Let's take a few breaths. And release. Yes. Inhale, arch the back, look up. Exhale, downward facing Adho Mukha Svanasana. Walk the feet to the front of the yoga mat. Take an inhale, halfway lift. Exhale and bow. Inhale, halfway lift, Ardha Uttanasana. Press the back of your hamstrings away from one another and exhale, bow. So you'll feel your outer hips engage when you do that. Inhale, halfway lift, press the heels isometrically out, press your hamstrings, your buttocks isometrically out, and then bow. Hands to the hips, arch the back, rise all the way up. Tadasana. Inhale, Urdhva Hastasana, reach up. Exhale, bow, Uttanasana, forward fold. Half lift on the inhale. Step left foot back as you exhale. High lunge, inhale, rise up. Hold here, pause. Let's take 2 more breaths, just to warm up the legs a little more. Lift the belly up. Lift the gaze up. Exhale, hands to the ground. Step into plank, inhale. Exhale, Chaturanga. Slide the hands wide. Let's do our 3-part cobra. Inhale, lift the chest. Soften your heart forward, shoulders back. Pull the chest through. Lift the belly, lift the abdomen up. Exhale, release. All fours, hands and knees. Inhale. Tuck the toes. Exhale, downward facing dog. Right leg, same leg to the sky. Inhale. Step forward as you exhale. High lunge. Inhale, rise up. Inhale all the way. This time open. Virabhadrasana 2, Warrior 2. Pause. Let's take 3 breaths. Inhale. What I'd like you to do here is activate your adductors, the opposing muscle groups. So just pull your feet toward each other. One more breath. Reverse warrior, inhale. Exhale, side angle preparation, but a little bit weird actually. Take your left hand to your hip, right hand to the outer knee, and tip your body more or less on the same diagonal as your back leg. Okay, not so much that your pelvis, your hip bones are collapsed onto your thigh. So you want to see that there's space of the front pelvis, okay? So you're just on a diagonal here. Now, press your right knee out into your hand. Your hand resists, so it pushes in a little bit, and the knee presses out until you feel your outer hip muscles activate. Keeping that, turn your pelvis the best you can. When you press your knee out, it'll open your pelvis. Isometrically turn your back thigh, let me say this, turn your back thigh in a little bit and squeeze your back foot towards the front foot. So back foot squeezes inward, front knee presses outward. Now turn the chest. Those actions are opposing one another, so if you're wondering why that's hard to do, it's because they're kind of like fighting each other a little bit. Okay, then release, hands to the ground. That should really fire up your outer hip. Turn the back heel up, step forward. Inhale, halfway lift. Notice your right hip versus your left hip. Exhale, bow. Inhale, rise to the sun. Urdhva Hastasana. Right to the earth, exhale. Uttanasana. Halfway lift, inhale. Right foot back as you exhale. Rise up, high lunge. Hold here as you exhale. Work on getting a little bit more light and lifted in the midsection. Lifted in the heart. One more breath, lift the gaze, lift the heart. Exhale, release, hands to the ground. Step plank pose. Chaturanga. Slide the hands wide, fingertips, inhale lift. Soften. Pull the heart forward and up. Exhale, release. All fours, inhale. Exhale, Adho Mukha Svanasana, down dog. Left leg to the sky, inhale. Step. High lunge, rise, inhale. Open Virabhadrasana 2. Hold. For now, just pull your feet toward each other, warm up the inner thighs a bit. Steady breath. What a privilege it is to be in this physical body. Feeling the pulse of our breath, the contraction and release of our heart, our muscular system. Reverse warrior, inhale. Exhale, side angle preparation, but again, a kind of awkward variation. So your hips more or less, they go on a slight 45-degree angle. So not all the way that you would be resting on your thigh,
but just a little bit on a diagonal. Okay, then take your left hand to your outer knee. With your hand, squeeze the knee in, and then with your knee, press out into that resistance. So you feel the outer hip muscles, these abductors, awaken. With the back leg, press the foot down into the earth and then drag it forward. So your back adductors, your inner thighs of the back leg are activating, while the abductors, the outer hips of the front leg, are activating. The adductors, the inner thighs of the back leg, are lengthened and active. The abductors of the front hip, the outer hip, are shortened and activated. Turn the belly, turn the chest. One more. And release. Pivot the back heel up. Step forward, halfway lift on the inhale. Exhale and bow. Inhale to the sunrise, Urdhva Hastasana. Exhale, hands to the heart. All right, place your hands on your thighs, bend your knees and pause. Let's get your outer hips awakened here. First, move your pelvis back, pubic bone back. Find anterior tilt of the pelvis. It's going to help you find your the front portion of your abductors, more the what's called the anterior fibers, as well as the TFL. So press the backs of your legs apart. When you do the backs of your legs apart, that's going to pull the ilium around towards the femur bone. So it's going to widen the back of your pelvis. I mean, ever so slightly. It's not going to be a massive movement, but you're going to feel a little bit of spreading in the back there. Okay, then lift the heart. Keep pressing the backs of the legs apart. Reach the arms up. Inhale, Utkatasana. Exhale, bow, Uttanasana, forward fold. Halfway lift on the inhale. Step or hop back, Chaturanga. Slide the hands wide, fingertips. Inhale, lift. Exhale, soften the chest. Shoulders back. Inhale, pull the heart forward and up. Exhale, release. All fours, hands and knees. Inhale. Tuck the toes. Exhale. Adho Mukha Svanasana, down dog. Right leg to the sky. Inhale. Step forward as you exhale. Rise, high lunge. Inhale. Vira 2. Reverse warrior. Inhale. All right, now take right forearm to the thigh. Pause. Again, pelvis doesn't collapse all the way. So use what we did in the beginning. Turn the pelvis open, and then think about your sit bone under here moving towards your back of your knee, and that will lift your front hip bone slightly up so that you're not collapsed down there. Now, slide your right hand to the inside of your foot or the outside of your foot if possible today. Press your front knee out into your bicep if you have that. If your hand's on the inside, then just try to press your knee away from your arm. But if you have it on the outside, great. Press the knee out into the arm. Feel your abductors activating. Turn the chest, turn the belly. Take the left arm up, maybe over your ear for full Utthita Parshva Konasana, side angle pose, extended side angle. Let's take a breath in and out. One more breath. And release. All right, so now we've got these outer hips, abductors really awakened. Let's lengthen them by crisscrossing the legs to opposite sides of the mat. So right foot to the left foot to the right, and wag your tail straight back to the degree that you can, where you're gonna start to feel a stretch along the outer IT band up through the outer hip. So that's gonna be your glute max, your abductor muscles. The only one that's not really stretching when you do this is your TFL. Okay, so you should be able to get
a decent stretch through the abductors here. And then, of course, the outer hamstrings as well, and bow forward. Feel free, if this doesn't quite target the outer hips and outer thigh there, if it doesn't quite get it, to maneuver, sometimes turning both feet, sometimes wagging the tail one direction or another, or sometimes closing the hips, opening the hips, can create different angles to get into the stretch of the outer hips. All right, coming on out, we'll bend both knees. Oh, sorry, we'll bend the front knee. And we'll walk to the center of the mat. Adjust your feet so that you're in Prasarita Padottanasana. Come up halfway, inhale. And press the back of your hamstrings away from one another, lifting the chest. Then bend the elbows and bow. Any variation of the hands, whatever you want to do is okay. Give a little widening. This is a shortening of the outer hips, shortening of the abductors. And I'm asking you to engage them by pressing the outer heels slightly out, or the backs of the legs apart. And this is a lengthening of the adductors. The inner thighs are lengthened. All right, walk the hands back out. Turn your toes out, Skandasana, bend the back knee. Take your fingers wide, chest lifted. This should stretch the adductors of your front inner thigh, that is. Lift the heart. Press your right foot, that's the straight leg, down and in until you feel the inner thigh muscles that we're just stretching. You should feel them now engaged. Okay, that stretch sensation should go away and turn into activation. Okay, notice that you didn't change the range of motion. The range of motion is still the same, right? You're still in the same flexibility, in other words, but now you're active with it. Okay, then your front knee, you're going to act, or your left knee, you're going to activate your abductors. So press your left knee out to the left so your outer hips engage. So the bent knee, abductors, knee presses out. Straight leg, adductors, inner thigh, foot presses down and squeezes in. Okay, and walk around to the front again. Step back, downward facing dog. Forward plank, inhale. Chaturanga. Slide the hands wide, inhale, lift. Soften. Pull the heart through and up. Inhale. And release. All fours. Inhale. Tuck toes. Exhale. Down dog. Left leg to the sky. Step forward. High lunge. Rise. Open, Viratu. Reverse. Side angle preparation. Pause, take a breath. Okay. Now, see if you can today, again, take your fingertips to the inside or outside if possible. It could be on a block or fingertips as I like here. And see if you can press your left knee out into the arm to open your pelvis up. Remember that it needs to be a little bit of a scoop of the left sit bone towards the back of your left leg in order for the hip not to be completely collapsed. Like, in order for you not to just, drop your pelvis here, there needs to be that little bit of sliding of the sit bone underneath, okay, while opening the pelvis. Not a tremendous amount, just enough to have the outer hips and buttocks fully active, also the hamstrings there. Then turn your belly, turn your chest. The front knee, the left knee presses out into the arm. The back leg press down into your foot and drag it forward. So again, you have your adductors, inner thighs of the back leg active, and abductors of the front leg active.
if possible, take your arm around. Three more breaths. And release. All right, so pivot the back heel up. Again, crisscross the legs. Wag the tail straight back behind you. Lengthen the chest. And bow over yourself. Coming on up, switch it to Skandasana to the back. Pivot your feet. Oh, sorry, Prasarita Padottanasana, my fault. Bend back the legs apart, bow forward. Any variation of your choice. Come on up, half lift. Pivot the toes out, Skandasana. So don't go all the way down for this variation, okay? Keep your legs lifted or hips lifted. And we activate the two muscle groups. The primary muscle group for today, press your front knee, which is now your back knee, your right knee, out to the right so you get your outer hip engaged. And press your left foot, your straight leg, down into the foot and towards your bent leg. So down and in, while this outer heel presses down and the knee presses out, okay? So your outer hip of your bent knee active. Couple more breaths. Feel the sensations you're creating from your actions. All right, back to the front of your yoga mat. Step into down dog. Check our timing. Oh, good. Perfect. Full breath in. Full breath out. Bring the knees to the ground. All right, so we'll be working with Ardha Chandrasana, half moon pose. We already broke down step one, which is to open the pelvis up. Now, that happens from the standing hip, but let's try this. Take your left leg back as if we're doing like a side plank posture. Right hand, come up onto the fingertips off on a diagonal. See, I'm off the mat with my right hand, so off to the right. Now, what opens the pelvis is the right hip, the standing hip, okay? That's what opens the pelvis. So close it a few times and open it a few times so you feel your outer right hip. In other words, sag your right hip to the right and squeeze it in. Sag, squeeze in a couple times, okay? Once you feel that, the next thing that you need for Ardha Chandrasana is the abductors, the outer hips of the back leg. So slowly tap it down a few times and back up. Okay, see if you can get the leg to be neutral rather than turning out or in or anything, just the leg, the toes facing straight out to the side. Okay, that's the outer hips of both legs active in Ardha Chandrasana. Okay, this is obviously a bent knee variation, making it a little easier on us in some ways, harder in other ways. It's harder to balance. Okay, right leg back behind you. Let's sag the left hip and squeeze it in. Sag, in, sag, in, sag, in. Okay, now keep it in
Open up. Keep the outer left hip in. Now we fire up the right abductors up to the sky without sagging the left hip out to the side. Keep the left hip in. Slowly the right leg comes down. Squeeze the abductors, outer hips of the right leg, and back down. Should have mentioned this earlier. Solution to releasing locked short and locked long muscles is strengthening them through their range of motion, while they are stretched out and while they are shortened, learning to activate them. So activating them through the fullest length that they can have. That's what will release a locked short or locked long muscle. So I was trying to explain to my dad is you need to lengthen this muscle first by massage, palpating, because I know how tight it is. If you just stretched, it would pull the tendon was already compromised to the bone, so it would pull that apart. So I said, let's massage the belly of the muscle. Let's get that more supple so that you can then eventually start to stretch that muscle, but it needs to be stronger. It needs to be first loved, massaged, then strengthened, then stretched. Okay, so let's go to Ardha Chandrasana. And let's see the 2 points. You can watch me one time. The 2 parts, I'm not sure which way to face. I'm going to show you, no, I'll show you from the side. 2 parts I'd like you to focus on is the standing hip, not sagging out to the side, but squeezing in, which is what's going to open the pelvis. And then the top leg, abducting this way. Now, the thing about abducting the top leg is you got to be mindful of how much it stretches the hamstrings and the adductors of your standing leg, okay? So when you abduct the bottom leg in, it's going to stretch the adductors because the pelvis opens up. But when you take the top leg up, it's going to stretch the adductors of the bottom leg even more. So please be mindful, go slow and sense or feel the sensations of the lengthened muscles, and only going to the degree that your adductors are welcoming the stretch. Okay, so let's try it. Right foot to the center of the mat. You can make a triangle with your hands. So outside. Take your left leg straight back behind you. Squeeze the outer right hip in. Now you're in Ardha Chandrasana preparation. Slowly lower the left leg a little bit. Keep it neutral, so not turned down or out. And then squeeze or press the outer left ankle to the sky to get the outer abductors working here. Left hand to the hip, any degree. Turn your chest, Ardha Chandrasana. Option to take the left hand to the sky. But really, I'd like you, rather than focusing on, the external decorations of the pose, like the hand and where the head is facing, to be focusing on the outer hip of the standing leg and the outer hip of the top leg. And of course, making sure that you're not overstretching the inner thighs. You're not feeling too much of a strain at all, or any strain for that matter. Stretch sensation is one thing. Strain you can feel. It's kind of like either a sharp or a dull, almost tearing. Okay, and then release. Okay, take a moment. Let's try the other side. Left leg to the center line. Right leg back behind you. The outer hip tends to be sagged out to the side. You're going to squeeze that in, which is going to open up your right hip, meaning your pelvis will open up. Then take your right leg up to the sky using your outer hip muscles. Okay, you can do a few pulses up, just very slow so you don't overstretch the adductors, but this way you can kind of feel the movement. And then the rest is a twist in the spine, using your abdominals and your back muscles to help rotate the spine the rest of the way. And again, the hand can come up, but again, it's more like a decoration than it is anything else. I really want to get to a point where you can feel your outer hips engaging. You might feel your adductors, your inner thighs of your standing legs stretching. But the sensation of those things, these activations, are what's important. Okay, and then release. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, downward facing dog. You just step back. Let's take the right shin across the mat. Okay, if you want to stretch your outer hips a little bit more, tuck your back toes and move your hips. So you take your left foot, move your hips a little more in alignment with your knee. So I'll show you the difference from the front angle. I'm going to take this down a little bit. Okay. So if I'm way out to the side, it shortens the abductors. Okay. If I come in a little bit, so the knee is more, not too far in front of the pelvis. You need a little space, otherwise your pubic bone will get interrupted. You'll feel pain there. Okay, but if you bring the knee in a little more to the midline, just a little bit, that'll stretch there. And I like for this, you can go off on a diagonal, maybe a little bit more further forward than I usually say, depending. Sometimes going way off on a diagonal, you can target. It's good to kind of feel, if you bow in different directions, how you can get the outer hip to stretch. Sometimes I press the heel across a little bit. That gives me a little more ability to get into the outer hip muscles there. Now, one thing you could do, which might feel nice for some of you, is you press your front knee, which is your right knee right now, out to the side and intentionally activate your abductors in this position. It might change the stretch. It might give you more movement, more range of motion in the pelvis. The opposite is true too. You can kick your foot across into your hand and activate your adductors, and that will stretch the abductors more. So if you press your foot across, you might get a deeper stretch in the outer hip. And ultimately, going back and forth very slowly, taking a few breaths with kicking across, pressing out. To me, that's probably the way to really kind of get deeper into this pose without running into any sort of joint issues, is to warm up the inner thighs, the outer hips while you're in it. So now I'm pressing the foot across into the hand. And I'm pressing the knee back out to activate the abductors. I'd love to hear what your experience is like. Share it in the Facebook group when you press your knee out. I know I've done press the knee down with a lot of you in many other immersions. So now we're pressing out actively to activate the abductors. I'd love to hear what your experience is there. You could also press in again, so the foot draws in. That gives me personally a bigger stretch in the outer hip. Okay, and release. We will switch the sides when you're ready. Again, you're going to try to line up a little bit so that your front knee is a little bit more centered than perhaps it usually is. The back thigh turning in, I use the back toes tucked in order to position that. And a little bow over. And as you stay and breathe, just, give yourself 2 to 3 breaths of pressing the knee out and feeling what that creates for you. Activating the abductors, the outer hips. And then what happens when you squeeze the leg across instead of pressing it out? Sometimes it's really nice to have your hand or your forearm there to kick the foot into that boundary. So you can, for me, that lifts my hips a little bit. Feel my inner thighs activate. Sometimes even I get my buttocks activating from that kick action, which is cool. Depends on how I position it. to, switch it back and forth, back to the abductors, pressing the knee out. Squeezing in. All right, come on out.
Come right onto your back. Nothing dramatic here. I just want to show you a quick way to explore half lotus. Okay, so with your knees bent, you take half happy baby. So this hand comes to the heel like this. The toes and thigh bone turn out. With this hand, you can gently rotate the knee out, bend the knee, and there you are in half lotus pose here, okay? This is a great way to start and learn the posture, making sure that there's no torque in the knee, no pain there before you try it seated. Okay, you would do the same thing on the other side. Hand comes to the outer knee, hand to the heel. And we try to get that rotational action without any torque in the knee. If you feel it, you move away from it. Okay, bend the knee, reach the leg across. So that's half lotus, as I talked about in the beginning. You could also work on a half lotus, half Agni Stambhasana by placing a hand to the heel here. Agni Stambhasana is fire log pose. And you would kick the foot into the hand. You don't try to pull the foot this way so much. That will cause torque in the knee on the other side. You just line up the best you can. Okay, then happy baby. And release in the Shavasana. Take a full breath to fill yourself with life force, with the energy, prana that flows through you. And let it go through the mouth, letting the teeth relax. Feel the pulse of your body. breath back to your awareness. Awaken the fingers and toes. Deepen your breath. Stretch the arms. Roll to your side, come up to a seated position. Placing the hands at the heart. We take this moment to acknowledge the magnificence of this human body with magnificent gratitude, for that matter, that we have this physical form and this practice of yoga to explore our body. It's one of the best parts, simply because the yoga practice gives us all these tools of developing self-awareness, and asana is the one that we use for our physical self-awareness. So we thank everyone that has passed this practice down to us, giving us this opportunity to be in our body and to be aware of it. Thank you all so much for tuning in today, getting to know your outer hip strength, inner thigh flexibility, and your outer hip flexibility, for that matter. Namaste. All right. Practice number 2 complete. Thank you all so much for practicing today, tuning in. Hope it serves you. Certainly feels good for me. Hope it feels good for you as well. And again, I would love to see some of your practices in the Facebook group. Share any part of the practice that really feels challenging or exciting to you, and just let me know if you would like feedback in the Facebook group. I'm happy to provide it, or if you just want to post for the sake of sharing, and that's also great too. A couple of the ones that I suggest sharing in the Facebook group is the first thing that we did on all fours, really, the fire hydrant with the arm out to the side. That's a good one because it's challenging, and a lot of times when you video yourself doing that, you realize that you might be feeling that you're doing something, but you're not quite doing it. And it's very helpful to see that. The other thing is just posting Ardha Chandrasana, getting into in this kind of step-by-step fashion where you open the pelvis, then you lift the back leg. And I can maybe give you some tips on that, okay? Thank you so much. See you soon.